All right, hello everyone. We're gonna get started. So welcome everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about Power Query, which is an amazing tool that I really hope I can instill a love in all of you for. And more specifically, we're going to talk about Power Query and enrollment tracking. But first off, my name's Brady Hampton. I also have up there with me Christina Smith. I'll be giving the. Okay, yeah. I thought I could project. Hello. Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Cool. All right. Good? Cool. So like I said, I'm Brady Hampton. This is Christina Smith. I'll be giving the bulk of the presentation. She'll be here if there's any questions about specific data elements. And yeah, so like I said, we're going to be talking about Power Query today. How many people in here have heard of Power Query before? Okay, how many people have actually used Power Query before? All right, so a lot of us have heard about it, not a lot of us have used it, which is pretty common. I didn't even know it existed until I took a class here at ASU and learned about it, and then it like changed my life forever. That's a little too much, but you know what I mean. How do I switch? All right. So first off, just more of an introduction of myself. Like I said, I'm Brady Hampton. I received my master's here at ASU in accounting and data analytics. Clearly, I went the data analytics route instead of the accounting route. But I now work at University Registrar Services. I'm part of the RegTech team. So I'm a business analyst. So we handle data, stuff like that, get reports out. And so that's what I do now. Back before, when I was still a student here at ASU, I used to work at HIDA at the Herberger Institute, and I was part of some of their finances, but a lot of the stuff I did there is I dealt with reporting. And so Power Query is something that when I learned about it, I immediately implemented it into our reporting, and I cut the time in like half by how long it would take us to get those reports ready. So like I said, it's a very powerful tool, and it's actually accessible as long as you have Excel. All right, so this is the agenda today. First, we're gonna do a brief overview of just Power Query in general, about what it's about and everything. After that, then I'm gonna go over enrollment tracking with Power Query specifically. And then I'll also demo a report that I created previously, just I call it enrollment tracking by college and department, but basically that's our plan for today. So first off, let's talk about what is Power Query. And so simply, I found this when I Googled it. It's a data transformation and data preparation engine. And like I said, it's built into Excel. So if you have access to Excel, you will have access to Power Query. It doesn't cost anything more. It's not a whole different program. It's right in there. And so I'm going to go in a little bit about just the three things I think are very powerful, the power of Power Query. The first one is that it's the ETL process all in one program. And so if you don't know what ETL is or aren't familiar with it, it's the extract, transform, and load process for data. And so first, Power Query to extract data, easily you can just, if you have a data set somewhere, whether it's a CSV, an Excel, you can even connect to databases with Power Query. You can easily import data into the function of Power Query, and then you can transform it by creating steps. Power Query has a lot of different functions and tools. It can summarize, it can clean, it can rearrange, it can merge, it can do all these different things that can really help, basically help you change the data and massage it into a way that's more accessible for you and users and for yourself as well. And then the last part is it loads it into Excel. And it can do this a few ways. One, it can just make a new Excel table for you, nice and sweet, just give you all the data you want. The next thing you can do is you can actually load it into a pivot table. So instead of having to do the middle step of making a table and then doing a pivot table, you can just have it be the background data of your pivot table. Same with the pivot chart. You can also just make a connection so that then your data is just connected to your Excel without actually importing it in there for easy reference later. And so it's a pretty powerful tool to have all of this in one step without the complexities of like Alteryx and things like that. Why did it go back to? There we go. The next thing you can do is it can merge your data from multiple data sources. You can kind of see here, 2 examples is merging. So you can take 2 different data sources or queries as they call them in there and merge them into one table based on fields. So for example, here I have 2 different enrollment tracking data sets. So I'm merging them on, the term label, college code, things like that. And so this will pull them together into one for easy comparison. It shows you how many are in both tables. Actually, I used this with someone in my team. They were wanting to compare data from before logic was applied and after logic was applied. And so we were able to take both data sets into one, compare them, and then we were able to find any unexpected changes that we weren't thinking about when the logic was applied originally. And so that was something that was really helpful instead of going through just lines of data and eyeballing it. The other thing you can do as well is appending on that side, where you can take 2 lists of similar columns and just add them together basically. So then instead of having just 2 data sets that are basically the same list, you can put them all into one list for easier access. And then the last thing I want to talk about is about how Power Query creates an automated process. So the first time you do it, you import, you do the extract, the transform, load. You do that all manually the first time. But after that, all it requires is the press of this refresh all button in Excel. And then as you can see here, all these steps that I did on I don't remember what Excel file this was, but some Excel file, I did all these steps in Power Query. So every time I hit that button, it now immediately runs through all those steps. I don't have to ever do anything manually again, unless I wanted to edit something. But other than that, all you do is hit refresh. Everything you did is done. And so that's the power of Power Query, is you're able to really transform your data, take it from different sources, and then just automatically have it reran in your reports without having to adjust much of anything. So continuing on with this about Power Query, I just want to talk about some common tools. I already kind of talked about merging and appending, which, like I said, that's how you can take multiple data sets, multiple tables, put them into one data set for easier comparison, or just to merge your data like you would in SQL or in Alteryx or Report Builder, anything like that. The other thing you can do is you can add a custom or conditional column. So just like you can add an if statement or based on a formula, you can easily add that to the end of your Power Query. So if you wanted to add multiple fields together, if you wanted to concatenate some fields, if you wanted to do anything like that, it's very simple to do that and add it to your data. And then once again, it's refreshable. So every time it runs, it'll add that new column or field based on your formula. Next is filtering. It works just like how in Excel. Kind of the difference with Power Query is that unlike Excel, to where those rows are just hidden, it actually does take that data out so that you won't see it unless you go back and you delete that filter later on. The most important step of Power Query is closing and loading too. That's kind of what I talked about with putting it into Excel. You can do it through pivot table, pivot chart, just a regular table, so on and so forth. And there is a lot more functions in Power Query. We'll do a demo later. Well, I'll kind of go a little bit more into Power Query. You can kind of see it hands-on. But there is a lot in Power Query. A lot of it I haven't even used. Recently, I did a little project where I wrote out how all the different functions worked. And there was like half of them I never even seen before. And it was very interesting to learn all these new ways I could use Power Query other than just these 5 I've given you. But yeah, so next we're going to talk about Power Query and enrollment tracking specifically, and just kind of how our team at RegTech has used or is planning on using Power Query to better our reports, make them quicker and more efficient. And so first off, this applies to everyone as well, but we made a new Alteryx workflow. So before we had the enrollment tracking workflow, which would create new tables, ADB tables, which are tables in our Redshift, that would be for enrollment tracking that people could pull from. And with those tables, we decided to take those and make summary tables that were easier, they would count, as you can see, they would count by EMPL ID. So that instead of having every EMPL ID specifically, you just had a simple count. this would make it easier to run in Excel, easier to reference, so on and so forth. And so this is something that we have made, and it is available for everyone who has access to enrollment tracking data. And yeah, so then with that, so what does this mean? Like, what does Power Query mean for enrollment tracking? So I have a nice little chart here. And so basically kind of what we talked about already, but the first thing you can do is you can pull in this enrollment data, either from the summary that I just talked about, or from the bigger tables as well. And then you can pull it into Power Query. You can transform it however you want, add any steps. You can summarize it, you can add new columns, so on and so forth, filtering all that. And then after that, you then can just load it into your Excel. So you already have transformed data in your Excel. You don't have to worry about transforming it there. And then after that, you can then go in and make your own customized report based on that data. So you don't have to go onto analytics and just pull a giant report and run with it. You don't have to ask someone else for help to report builder to worry about that or anything else. You can just use Excel simply with data already pulled to customize your report using VLOOKUPs or anything else your heart desires. And then after you do that, you get it all formatted, you have it looking the way you want. Then all you have to do is hit refresh data daily, weekly, monthly, however often you want. And this whole process will be ran again. However, it'll be ran automatically. And so this could create a report that then is easy for an end user to refresh by hitting a click of a button. Makes it easier for you, as in you don't have to go and do all these unnecessary downloads from analytics, from an email, so on and so forth. All it does is just makes it to where you already have a formatted report in Excel. It's looking the way you want. You just hit the refresh button. Now it has correct numbers again, and you don't have to do anything to reformat it or make it look pretty again. It's just automatically the way you want it to look. And so now I'm just going to talk about some of the resources that we have for enrollment tracking. For example, here are some of the data sources. So that top there is the link that takes you to the folder. It's a file path to where all these CSVs are saved. So like I said, we have that new Alteryx workflow that has the summary. And the summary, kind of like I showed, it just takes a lot of different fields and summarizes them so that they work better in Excel. Because sometimes Excel chugs a lot when you put too much data into it. But some of the other ones we have, just to mention them as well, we have comparison and current. And then we also have the comparison detail and current detail. And so comparison just compares both the term you want to look at. So say if we were wanting to do fall of 2027, with the previous year of that same term, the previous same day. So fall 2027, not 2027, sorry, fall 2022 to fall 2021. And that's what that gives you, is it gives you that comparison term, and it tells you basically, it gives you an easy way to compare the two. While current just gives you the current term, all the data for the current term. And the detail just it's more granular. It just has more in it than another term, which also means more data, which is great, but it also means Excel works a lot harder. So these first two, you can use them with Power Query, of course. However, it does take a little longer to run. I know when I did it, it took about 30 minutes, which may be fine. For me, I'm impatient, and so I didn't like that. So therefore, we made the summary tables, which take less than a minute to refresh. But yeah, and so the next thing is just some more like trainings or just helpful guides on the analytics page. There's Power Query 101, which is on the trainings. If you go to analytics, you go up to resources, there's a trainings tab. You can find Power Query 101, which goes into a lot of the different formulas, a lot of the different functions, a lot of different tools, things that I do not have time to go through with you today. But it's something that's very helpful. I can help you learn more about Power Query and some of the tools and functions it has. Next one is our enrollment tracking data sources. You can get that through the enrollment and records on analytics.
Enrollment records and then the enrollment tracking reports page.
Yeah. So if you go to enrollment, the enrollment and records on analytics, and then there's that, it's called that page, the enrollment tracking data sets. Right? Yeah, data sources. It'll give you reference to how to get to the link I shared on the last page. It also has the second one, which is the quick reference guide for enrollment tracking. And that gives you everything about the different tables that we have that we use, the different CSVs, what they're used for, when they're updated, and more information like that. This is actually that page I was talking about, the Power Query data sets. So like I said, it gives you step-by-step instructions on how to use Power Query to connect, how to get to the actual CSV files. And then we also have on there now a pre-built Excel that already has, it's the one I'll be building later today during the demo, but it's on there so for your download and use. So you can either use that, or you can even go in yourself and customize it how you want, build your own version of it. It's just kind of a sample on there for your help and for your use. Yeah, so next I'm going to go into the demo. That's going to be the bulk of the presentation. But before that, any questions generally about anything I've said so far? Yeah.
What about version as it takes? So if I click the fish on button, it's kind of automatically processing it, right?
Yeah.
So what if I want the older version of data to also?
Is that what's happening?
What if I want the older version of the data to also be present in the Excel sheet? Is that something that Power Query?
The original? So that's something we were actually considering too. So it is easy to have the original stay. So for example, I'll show you later too, but you can delete your data connection, but it doesn't delete your data. And then you can save it off as its own, like, snapshot of today. However, when you refresh Power Query, I mean, it pulls the data source as of when you pull it, right? So if your data source doesn't show that previous day, then your Power Query isn't going to be able to show that. But like I said, it's easy just to delete a connection, save a snapshot somewhere else. So you have, what's today? November 1st data, and then tomorrow you do it again and you save it as November 2nd data, so on and so forth. So yeah, no problem. Any other questions? Sweet. All right. So we're going to move on then. So now I got to switch to my laptop real quick. So hold on a sec. Can you guys see that? Oh, sweet. I thought I was going to have to do more to get it to work like that. Sweet. All right. Okay. So this is the report that I'm going to be building. It's going to be a basic version of this report, but this is the one that's actually currently on that I kind of showed you that's on the analytics page. But basically, this is just enrollment head count for currently it's set the spring, but it's a term comparison report. And so over here, I have, these are called, I'll talk about them. They're called slicers. I get them mixed up with splicers. I don't know why I say the both, but if I switch, just know I'm talking about these. And I think the correct term is slicers. But so I can switch this to 2227, which is going to be this term. As I scan over, it will automatically update my numbers for us. And then also I can adjust it as well. I have it adjustable to college. So I want to have a preference of college they want me to choose. Just yell one out.
Liberal arts science.
We'll do liberal. Yeah, sure. If I could click correctly. Liberal arts and sciences, student American Indian Studies. And there we go. So you see it updated now to be that one. And yeah, so this is the report we're going to build. Just a sample of it, but we're going to go more through the Power Query, since I'm sure that's more what you're excited about than what I've been working on. So here is my demo. I had it formatted. I already have all the sum functions, since I'm sure you guys either know how to use sum functions or you can figure it out. And the main point of today is Power Query. So we're going to go on. And the big thing you want to do here is this data tab. This data tab is where Power Query is housed. So you click here, you can go to get data. Like I said, you can get it from an Excel, from a CSV, some other stuff. You can actually pull in a whole folder. That's where the append function really comes in, because you can pull in a folder, and then if you added more to that folder, it would automatically get pulled in the next time you refresh. It's something I actually used with, we would send out a newsletter at my old job. And so we just had a folder to where we download the content of clicks and just keep adding it to the end. And it worked great. You can also do it from a database. I've tried that a little bit. It does work a lot slower, but that's a possibility. But so we're just going to click here from text CSV. Sweet. And then we're going to go to, where is it? Here it is. So like I said, here's that file path again. So this is all the enrollment tracking comparisons and currents, all our CSV files that you can pull from. Like I said, if you use a detail or just a regular one, it might take a little longer to load. Like I said, Excel gets a little insufferable when you put too much data into it. But that's why we have the summary reports to make this easier. And so I'm going to go up to comparison summary. You just click it and then click import. You wait a little bit for it to load and connect. So you get this screen. This just gives you a summary, basically a preview of what you're importing. And then we're going to hit edit. I would suggest always hitting edit, not really hitting the load button. Load will just basically take this and put it into your Excel. But of course, we want to transform our data. So we want to edit it first. And that will open up the Power Query editor window. So just a few things about Power Query, just to show you, I'll give you a little tour. Over here, you have what they're called queries. So this is like your tables, basically all the data that you import. We've only imported the enrollment tracking comparison summary, but if I were to go in and import another set of data, it would pop up here. You can switch between the two here. And each one is edited separately. So it's not like you go in and if I were to put in another one, I were to do steps to the top, it wouldn't switch up the second one. It only changes the top one. But here you have all your columns, all your fields, all your records. And then over here, you have the name, but you also have applied steps. And so applied steps is, as it says, the steps that you have applied to your data. Currently, so we have 3. These 3 generally happen every time you import your data. You have the source, which is just saying that's where it's pulling it from. It's how it's pulled. It's the original data. It always promotes headers, which I'll show you. You can see here that the first row is our headers from the CSV. And then it automatically puts those as your main fields at the top so that they're not part of your data. And then it also changes the data type of your different fields to what it thinks it should be, which it's a very helpful feature, but I will let you know that sometimes Power Query doesn't actually know what it's talking about. And it thinks it's smarter than you, but it's not. So always make sure to check your data and make sure that it looks like how you want, which we're actually going to do right now because S term is not a number. It's actually text. The way this door just fell off. Sorry. Oh. So generally a good tip is that if you're not going to add, subtract, do anything to a number, then the field shouldn't be a number. It should be text. If it is a field that you can see yourself wanting to summarize or do anything to, then you should leave it. S term, we're never going to add or subtract from S term because it is a identifier. So we're going to switch that to text. So all I did is I clicked on this little 1, 2, 3. This is how you know what data type it is. 1, 2, 3 is a number. We click this and then we go down to text. We'll bring this up. It's just asking if I want to basically make a new step, which I don't. I just want to apply it to the original step. So I'm just going to replace current. And we're going to do the same with some others. So we want to switch comparison term to text. And then some other ones as well. So we're going to switch career sort. To select more, you just control click. So we picked those ones. And then if you want to do multiple, you can come up here, right here to where it says data type, click it and do text. Replace current. Boom. So now it's kind of laid out. It's the data types are the way we want it so that now we can do future steps. And so now we're going to actually get into transforming our data a little bit to match. which this is the hard part because I've always done this on multiple screens to where I can look at my steps. And now I have to remember them off the top of my head. But just a little bit about Power Query first all. So we have these different tabs here. We have Home, Transform, Add Column, and View. View is just basically settings. I don't really use it much. But the other three are very important. Home just has some that affects the whole Power Query, such as closing and loading, removing rows, so on and so forth. Transform will take a row like S term and change it based on whatever function you use. For example, we can replace values. So we could replace all ones with the zeros if we wanted, and that would change everything in that column. While add column, add and transform are very similar. However, add actually makes a new column as opposed to replacing the column that you currently have selected. And so that is something to be very careful when you're using Power Query. I've had many times where I've accidentally transformed a column and then I had to go back and do it all over again because I meant to add a column instead. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you add a column, like the same things that you do to, let's say we were wanting to transform S term or whatever, but we wanted to add a new column, you can still do the same things. You just are adding a column. Like, are the same options there?
They're not all the same options, but most of them are the same, if that makes sense. Like, I'm trying to think. Data type's not in an add column because you wouldn't want to add the same column of a different data type. If that makes sense. But other things, I mean, they have a lot of the similar functions, but they're different too. But generally, most of the stuff you'd use transform for, you'd also find an add column. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we actually want to scroll over to our created. This column, it's the created, it's basically just when it was created, when the data was refreshed. And so the thing with this is we don't want the time because most people don't really care to know exactly what time it is that it was refreshed. So we're actually going to come here. We're going to go up to transform. We don't want to add a new column. We just want to change this column. We're going to go over here to this date. So this lets you mess with dates, basically date columns. And we want to do it date only. I right-clicked on accident. So all that does is it just returns me the date. Does not give me time. So now I just have a simple date I can use. And while we still have this column selected, just to kind of show you even more, we want to go to the add column button. See, this is kind of what we were saying, how date's also here. Go to year and click year. And that's going to give me a new column that just is simply the year from the date column, in case we needed to sparse that out for some reason. I'm going to change this to text because once again, we're not going to be adding or subtracting from the year. All right. So after we do that, we now want to create a new, I'm trying to remember, custom column. Yes, we want to create a custom column because we're going to be using VLOOKUPs. So we want to create a column that we can easily reference. And so we're going to call this column VLOOKUP. We're going to pull in 3 different columns from the right, which are going to be our career sort, which if we did not turn career sort into text as we did earlier, it would not let me concatenate it with other columns because you can't combine number columns and text columns. So that's why it's important to kind of look at your data first. I've also never done this with one hand. So anyway, and then we're going to put in NRC, which means new, returning, or continuing. So that's referring to our students. Another ampersand. And then we're going to do RNI, which stands for resident, non-resident, and international. And we hit OK. So now you can see we have a whole new column that's just combining those 3 columns together. So every time I refresh it, if there's new data added, it will automatically just follow this formula I put in. So that's a custom column. As you can see, we just used, we just typed in a formula. I believe Power Query uses DAX as its language, which I'm sure I would be surprised if any of you have really heard of it, except maybe if you've used Power Query. DAX is like used nowhere else. So it's one you'll have to look up. I can't help you too much there, but anyway, but so after we do that, now we want to do a conditional column, which is just like your if statement if you were in Excel, except it gives you a nice, easy little thing here to work with. So we're going to call this main campus. Yeah, and then we're going to use the campus description column. So this is just basically, I can go in and just like an if statement, you apply rules. So I'm going to do, if the campus description column contains Tempe, if I can spell correctly, then return to me the value Tempe. And this is going to add a new column that based on whatever rules I put in here is going to be the conditions it follows. So if I click the add rule button here, I can just simply add a new rule. Which is going to take a while because it's all the same. So basically what I'm doing here is I want to do the 4 main campuses, which is Tempe, West, Downtown, and Polytechnic, and then do online and then do other location. This is just a way to separate it up basically. It's West. Let's put West. Yeah, make sure your stuff matches up. While I do this, is there any questions? Or yeah. A gear sign? You're talking about like, I don't know what I want. Yeah, so basically that lets you edit a step. So if you were to do a formula, let's say you messed up your formula, or say like you do a filter and you filtered it to fall, but now it's spring and you want to change it. You can click on that and it'll open up the box again, just like how we have this box up. So when I finish this step, it'll create another one. And if I wanted to change what this was doing, I would click the gear sign to open it up. Does that make sense? Okay, I'll show you after as well. Any other questions? Okay, what am I missing? Polytech, right?
Polytechnic, yeah.
Is that how you spell that? Sorry, the last one is online. All right, so once we do that, so now, like I said, it's the campus description contains any of these, return these values. And then we have an otherwise, which is just, if it doesn't have any of these values, then just give me whatever I put in this box. I'm going to put as other locations. And we hit OK. So now you can see we have a whole new column that's basically determining based on the campus description column, giving me what I said I wanted back. So if it has West, it's going to give me West, so on and so forth. Yeah, and so like showing what you asked, I click this after I created it, say I did something wrong, click it, it opens it back up. So now I can adjust the step. There is no Control Z in Power Query. So there's the X, which is delete step, and then there's this, which is fix step. But there's no Control Z. So if you hit Control Z and it's not undoing what you did, that's why. So now,
The order of the steps?
no.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, you can. I learned something new too. You can change the order, so that's good to know. Be careful though, if you have steps that rely on previous steps, changing the order is gonna. Power Query can get mad very easily. All right, the last thing we want to do is create another custom column that we're going to call campus year. And so we're going to pull in the new campus main that we just made. We're going to combine it with a DAX function, which is text dot end, which text dot end is basically the write function in Excel. And then we're going to do our term label, right? That's a little here. I'm pretty sure. And then we want only the 4. And so this right here will tell you if you did it right or if you did it wrong. It will give you an X and say, I don't remember what it says, but basically it says you did it wrong, fix something, which right now it says we're good. So, and then even sometimes that will tell you you're good, and then you put it in and you just get a huge error. But as you can see now, basically from the term table, the term label, which is what says spring 2023, we now combine that with our campus main, which this is just going to be looked up for a VLOOKUP later as well. So as you can see, I just prepared the data for what I know I'm going to need in my report. It's easy to go back in and adjust. So now I'm going to go here, do close and load 2. Is there anything else while we're still in the Power Query window that anyone wants to see or ask about? Because the rest of this will be in Excel. So, all right. So once we hit close and load, you have these 2 options, which is close and load and then close and load 2. My suggestion is to usually pick close and load 2 as it gives you more options. If you do close and load, it simply just puts it into a table in Excel, which sometimes if you have too much data that can really mess things up or so on and so forth. So if we do close and load 2, let it load. You get these. Like I said earlier, we can either put into a table, a pivot table, which this calls it a pivot table report, a pivot chart, or you can just make a connection. We actually want a pivot table because we don't want to see all this data. We just want to be able to summarize this data even further. Want to put into a new worksheet. And then also we want to add this data to the data model, which is a good step. It helps you refer in future pivot tables if you make more than one. So I suggest picking that as well. It also lets you do distinct counts, which you can't do if you don't do that. So anyway, hit OK. And we wait. So now you can see over here, we have this new table, this new sidebar called queries and connections. And this shows everything you've pulled in through Power Query. We've only pulled in one. If you want to open it when it's closed, you can go up to data and click queries and connections, and that will open it up as well. If you highlight over it, you can see a nice little preview. You can see all the fields you're pulling in. We were talking earlier about saving it off. This is how you delete it, is you just click the delete button right here, or you could right click and delete. But you can also go to edit and open back up the Power Query. So if something didn't work right, or like we said, if you wanted to change your filter, you can easily get back in, exit a step, hit settings, so on and so forth. All right. So now we actually want to build out this report we have here. We actually need to fill it with numbers. So we're going to go to our little pivot table, which I wish was a little bigger so I could see it, but and we're going to put campus here in columns. So this will separate the years and so on and so forth. We're going to put our VLOOKUP in rows, as we're going to be referencing that. And then we're going to put our count distinct EMPL ID and our values. So now we have a pivot table that's basically telling us for downtown 2021, this is how many people we had for these columns and so on and so forth. And then we're going to go up to analyze and pivot tables and do insert slicer, which are really nice. That was the filtering buttons I had earlier. And so we want to filter it by our comparison term, which will let me do spring 2023, spring 2022. I want to do our college short description, so we can adjust by college, do department, and then do division as well. Once you hit OK, boom, you see all of them pop up. So now we can do 2020, that's spring 2023. Now it's showing us that data. So next thing we want to do is just grab this, go out to, I don't know, P or whatever. The reason I go beyond the data table is in case I refresh it and there's more data than I expected. And now we can go up here. I don't know if you guys know this trick in Excel. It's really great. But if you select this range and then go up to that little left box where it says A3, you click it and then you type something in. Oh, I'm going to type in data and then hit enter. Now data is a range that's defined by this. And so now whenever I want to reference this table in a function, all I have to do is enter equals data. It'll automatically know what I'm referring to. Just a helpful little trick if you didn't know. So yeah, now that we've done that, I want to go back here. Now we're actually going to start building out this report using VLOOKUPs and match functions, which I see we're running out of time. So I am actually just going to go back to this. You should probably, never mind. I'll show you. Okay, so we use a match function to.
That's fine. If you want to go back to the other.
Yeah, we'll just go back. We don't have as much time. All right. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what we did. All right. So first on the left, we have these values, which as you can see, match our VLOOKUPs. There we go. As you can see, matches the VLOOKUPs that we have here. And they're all just based on if they're a first-year student. It's basically combining the career sort, which undergraduates are 1, grads are 2. The NRC column, which is if they're a first-year student, new, continuing, so on and so forth. And then if they're an AZ resident or not, and then if they're international. And so we basically just use these in our VLOOKUP functions. As you can see, I had it called something different here, but I named it comp data or data. And so when I type it into my VLOOKUP, it simply just references that table. It knows I'm referencing that table, and then it pulls from that table. So for example, we have a new transfer. We have 3 AZ residents who are new transfers in Tempe in 2021. So if we look here, Tempe 2021, I completely forgot what I just said. New transfer AZ residents, you can see it's 3. So it's pulling from this data automatically. So, and here to find out, basically in the VLOOKUP, you need to say what column you want it to pull back. Since we don't know, and when you change your filters on the pivot table, it can adjust where things are. Basically, we need to make a static number we can use. So therefore, we use the match function here just to pull back. That refers to this top right here and tells me what column is Tempe 2021 in. So that then when it pulls the data, it knows where to refer. And yeah, we'll stop there actually. I think that's good. So any questions or anything you guys want me to delve into a little more? Or... Sweet. And I didn't see anything on chat. So all right, well that's all I got for you guys today. Like I said, if you guys have any more questions, there were those. There were the links I gave. You can look at the analytics site. The analytics site has a lot that can provide a little more help on Power Query or accessing these CSV files. But yeah, like I said, Power Query to me is something that's been very helpful. It's really automated a lot of the processes that I do. I'm someone who likes to find, this probably isn't the best way to say it, but I like to find new ways to be lazy. So therefore I put a lot of time into automating things so that I can work on other things instead. And so it's something that can be very helpful, whether you use it for enrollment tracking like I showed today, or whether you have your own processes or reports, your own data you can pull in. Power Query is something that can really help. And like I said, it's a lot simpler than using Alteryx or some of those other programs. It doesn't require as much training as you would. Yeah, that's all I have for you. So thank you for coming.